All right, welcome. Thank you for praying for those different requests. And we want to begin by going over our books of the Bible. Hope that you're getting them nailed down here little by little as we go through the Old Testament. So they're up on the screen, and let's say these together. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, 1 Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. Good to work on those. And so those last ones here with these 12 minor prophets, sometimes we struggle probably finding those the most in the Old Testament. We are in the books of 1 and 2 Samuel. 1 Samuel last week was lesson 9. This week is lesson 10, page 42 if you want to turn there. And one of the things we ran out of time last week to show you was a little bit of a map, and I see now that I should have zoomed this in a little bit more so. But this is from a program called Bible Mapper that I use sometimes. But you can just see here many of the different judges listed in the with the little boxes and the black lines. And you can see how the judges were in different areas. Sometimes we're not thinking about the fact that these judges didn't rule the whole nation. We forget some of the layout of the geography of the land and things like that. But when we look at some of the places where they served, we see how they were very regional. And one of the themes from the book of Judges was there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. And when we understand how they were so regional, how it caused the nation, in a sense, to be very divided and independent. Certainly there were some blessings to the kings that would come. And so you can see some of the different locations here. Tribes of Judah would have been down here, and then some of the other tribes working upward. Gideon, you can see Mizpah was a famous location that we've talked about, but just some of the different places from this day and time, and just a little bit before where we are today in time. So let's look at the book of 2 Samuel is where we're studying today. We learned last week, so remind yourself, that originally Samuel was one book. And because it was such a long book, took 2 scrolls, when they translated it into Greek, it began to be for the first time divided into 2 books, the books of 1 and 2 Samuel. And now everybody thinks of it as 2 books, even the Jewish people as well, the books of 1 and 2 Samuel. As we were thinking about it last week, we talked about the fact that Samuel is named as such for a couple reasons. Samuel was probably one of the authors of the book. We learned that Samuel dies. His death is recorded in chapter 25, and so we assume that he didn't write much after that, right? So some others chimed in and continued on. So the books are named after him in some senses because he's one of the authors. He's also one of the key figures. The first 7 chapters of 1 Samuel have to do with him. And then also because he is an influence on the main characters in the rest of the books of 1 and 2 Samuel. He anoints Saul, and then he anoints David, and those are the 2 main characters in the rest of 1 and 2 Samuel. So remind yourselves of those details. Chapters 1 through 7 of 1 Samuel had to do with the life of Samuel, and then the life of Saul, really, in his reign, and then the early life of David as Saul's reign comes to a conclusion. That's what was happening in the book of 1 Samuel. So now we jump into 2 Samuel, and 2 Samuel is going to be basically all about the life and reign of King David. It's going to continue a little bit into 1 Kings, but 2 Samuel is going to deal with David. In the opening chapter of 2 Samuel, we have the Amalekite talking about killing King Saul. And if you've read through the end of 1 Samuel and into 2 Samuel, you feel like you hear 2 different versions of the story. And, critics would maybe say there's a mistake in the Bible that Saul kills himself, and yet the Amalekite claims that he killed Saul. There's a couple different ways that can be explained. One of them brought out here in the idea that this Amalekite, thinking, hey, Saul's finally dead. I'm going to go tell David about it, and David's going to give me high fives and some money, pot of gold or something like that, and say, finally, I'm done with Saul. This is great. And David doesn't exactly take that perspective. Let's look at 2 Samuel chapter 1. All right, 2 Samuel chapter number 1 in your copy of the Scriptures. And as you're turning there, if the Amalekite would have known David very well, how did David treat King Saul as King Saul was hunting him? All right, we have two stories that make this very clear. We didn't talk about these last week, but twice David has some opportunities with King Saul. Do you remember what those opportunities are? Where King Saul is right there in his hands. Where's Saul at? One time he's in a cave, right? And David's in the back of the cave. And Saul goes in there, and David has the advantage. He can take him out, and it's over. What's the other time? Yeah, Saul is sound asleep, and David sneaks into the camp, and he's got the opportunity to just to have Saul taken out there. And neither time does he do it. Why doesn't he do it? Yes, God has anointed him as the king. He's the anointed of the Lord, and his hand is not going to be upon him. That's a huge lesson for us. Saul's a jerk. Saul is just not a nice guy. He's going after him. He is wrong. He is wicked. And yet David says, I'm not going to touch him. God's going to take care of it. Many times in our lives, we have other people that are over us, and they don't handle things rightly, and they maybe are wicked people, and we get pretty frustrated at them at times, and we can be tempted to take matters into our own hands and handle things wrongly. And so David showed already that he's not going to touch King Saul. And so this Amalekite comes in here and claims to have killed Saul. And verse number 13, David said unto the young man that told him, Whence art thou? And he answered, I am the son of a stranger, an Amalekite. And David said unto him, How wast thou not afraid to stretch forth thine hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? And David called one of the young men and said, Go near and fall upon him. And he smote him that he died. And David said unto him, Thy blood be upon thy head, for thy mouth hath testified against thee, saying, I have slain the Lord's anointed. And so if in some way Saul had tried to kill himself by falling on the sword, and maybe the Amalekite did come along and finish him off, or just was bragging about it wrongfully and lying about it, your first blank to fill in there, page 42, he executed the man because he had killed the Lord's anointed, the king of Israel. And so there's a high respect here for this King Saul, even though he was very wrong. And then let's look at verse number 17. And David lamented with this lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan, his son. Verse number 19. The beauty of Israel is slain upon thy high places. How are the mighty fallen? Tell it not in Gath, publish it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. Ye mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew, neither let there be rain upon you, nor fields of offering. For there the shield of the mighty is vilely cast away, the shield of Saul, as though he had not been anointed with oil. From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan turned not back, and the sword of Saul returned not empty. Saul and Jonathan were lovely and pleasant in their lives, and in their death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles, they were stronger than lions. Ye daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you in scarlet with other delights, who put on ornaments of gold upon your apparel. How are the mighty fallen in the midst of the battle, O Jonathan? Thou wast slain in thy high places. I am distressed for thee, my brother Jonathan. Very pleasant hast thou been unto me. Thy love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women. How are the mighty fallen, and the weapons of war perished? Now, I want you to think here for just a moment. Let me get to this question. How would this be challenging for David to lament King Saul and Jonathan? I read David's lament. I mean, Saul, I want you to think about at your table, David and Saul's relationship for a moment, and news comes in that Saul's dead. What's your natural reaction going to be? Yay. Yeah, Vi's giving you answers. Listen carefully here, all right? And I want you to just meditate on this for a little bit, what this says about David's character, and what this was like here, all right? So discuss that at your tables for a minute or two. Well, I want you to just think about that for a moment, just understanding some of David's character brought out in this way, in lamenting over Saul and Jonathan, and not just immediately throwing a celebration and partying with the Amalekite here. Says much about David's character by way of introduction to his reign as he is beginning here. So we find here the outline that our author gives of this book, and Roman numeral 1 is going to be David's rise, and then we're going to have his fall, and then we're going to have his closing days in chapters 21 through 24. So let's talk a little bit about his rise. What city does he go to? Chapter 2 and verse number 1. And it came to pass after this that David inquired of the Lord. Hey, isn't that a great thing? God, what do you want me to do? Saul's dead. Jonathan's dead. You anointed me as king some 12, 15 years earlier. Okay, what step do I take? Shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah? And the Lord said unto him, Go up. And David said, Whither shall I go up? Where shall I go up? And he said unto him, Unto Hebron. He's just praying every step of the way. God says, okay, go. Okay, where? And God says, here, this is the location. And so he goes to Hebron. Fill that in your outline there. Hebron. And if you want to turn to page 46, you can see a little bit of where that's located. It's a little south of Jerusalem, a little south of Bethlehem there. Bottom half of your map is the location of Hebron. And David goes there first, and the men of Judah come and anoint him to be king of Judah. And he's king of Judah for 7 years, I believe it is. 7 years just of that area. And as you flip the page over, page 43, after a few years of opposition from other tribes, David won the hearts of all of Israel because of his abilities and great spirit. He ultimately has no real rival, and the representatives from all the tribes come to Hebron to anoint him king by the time we get to chapter number 5. And what's David's first project? Okay, go to chapter 5 and verse number 6. Chapter 5 and verse number 6. You read this, and it makes total sense that he's going to do this. Chapter 5 and verse number 6. And the king and his men went to Jerusalem unto the Jebusites, the inhabitants of the land, which spake unto David, saying, Except thou take away the blind and the lame, thou shalt not come in hither. Thinking, David cannot come in hither. And that's probably was an insult. You know, David couldn't even beat a handicapped person. Is kind of what the insult may have been that they're trying to communicate there. Verse 7, Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion, the same as the city of David. And David said on that day, Whosoever getteth up to the gutter and smiteth the Jebusites and the lame and the blind that are hated of David's soul, he shall be chief and captain. Wherefore they said, The blind and the lame shall not come into the house. So David dwelt in the fort and called it the city of David. And David built round about from Milo and inward. And David went on and grew great, and the Lord God of hosts was with him. Verse 10 is an awesome verse. And so David sets up a capital city. If he's going to be king, he's going to have a capital city. And he sets Jerusalem up as this city. The Jebusites have been entrenched there for some period of time. Jerusalem, again, if you want to look at page 46, you can see it's fairly centrally located there. Some neutral territory. It's just a great location for a capital city. He's not taking it from any other, used city by anybody else at this point. He's taking it from an enemy, the Jebusites, and it's awesome. And so while the author is talking to us about David setting up his capital city, he goes on and tells us that if this is his capital city, David's going to want to have he's going to want to have the Ark of the Covenant there as well. And so last we know from 1 Samuel chapter 7, the Ark had been located at Kirjath-jearim, and David's going to bring that up to the Lord. Look at chapter 6, verse 1. Again, David gathered together all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000, and David arose and went with all the people that were with him from Baali of Judah to bring up from thence the ark of God, whose name is called by the name of the Lord of hosts that dwelleth between the cherubims. And of course, you remember the story of them setting the ark on a cart and it taking them a couple attempts. The story of Michael is in there as well in verses 12 through 16, somewhere in that range. And so David brings the ark to Jerusalem. And once he gets it to Jerusalem, let's go to chapter 7 and verse 1. This is a very important chapter in the Bible. And it came to pass when the king sat in his house, and the Lord had given him rest round about from all his enemies, that the king said unto Nathan the prophet, See now, I dwelt in a house of cedar, but the ark of God dwelleth within curtains. And Nathan said to the king, Go, do all that is in thine heart, for the Lord is with thee. And so David is wanting, now that he's got it in the city of Jerusalem, he's wanting it to have its own structure, its own temple. And Nathan initially says, yeah, go do it. And then God gives Nathan some other directions and some instructions. Let's look at verse number 16. God's response is, And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. And so there's your blank to fill in there. His throne, even his house, is going to be established forever. Pretty awesome thing when you think of monarchs. They want their lineage established. And not only is his house going to be established, but his kingdom is going to be established. This didn't always happen. There were families that were wiped out. There were kingdoms such as Saul's that ended. The northern kingdom of Israel had several different kings that would come to the throne, wiping out the king before them completely. This wasn't a given. And of course, how was this promise fulfilled? You should know this. How is this promise fulfilled? Ultimately, it's in whose descendant? The descendant of David's descendant, Jesus Christ. There we go. Tongue-tied here this morning. That he's the son of David, as the lineage of Matthew and Luke would bring out there. So you can put that in your blank as well. All right, Jesus Christ, he's going to reign on the throne of David and reign forever. All right. Now, chapter 8 is an interesting thing here. They make a comment on the bottom of page 43. Chapter 8 of 2 Samuel predates the events of chapter 7. And the reason that is said is because in chapter 8 it talks about David smiting the Philistines and subduing them and some of his different battles. What is happening in chapter 7 and verse number 1? It says that the Lord had given him rest round about from all of his enemies. So if you know, it seems like in chapter 7 David has all this peace. Chapter number 8, now he's got battles again. And it may have just been that the author, as he's writing this, says, well, okay, David becomes king. Let's talk about the fact that he gets a capital city. While we're at it, let's talk about the fact that he brings the ark. While we're talking about the ark, let's talk about the fact that he wants to make a temple, and God promises his an eternal kingdom. And so he just kind of chases that line of thought all the way to its end, and then comes back and picks up the chronology in chapter number 8. We do this all the time in the way we're speaking. And so if that's possible, if that's what happened there, that's not a big deal. He just comes back and picks up the chronology in chapter 8. Now, they give you a map on page 46 as well as some different chapters here, 8, 10, 11. And so skim down through those chapters for a moment at your table and see if you can come up with the 6 different countries or 6 different regions that David conquers at that point. All right, so work on that at the top of page 44. On your own there. All right, so what were some of the different countries that they conquered here? Let's start with this side. What's one of them? Yes. Okay, good. Say it again there. Okay, Hadadezer, okay. And some of the other ones here. Phoenicia. The Philistines. Okay, let me just put a bunch of them up here, okay? Different names, different kings, that whether you gave the king's name, whether you gave the region's name, city's name. All right, so those listed there, you can put them in the blank. Now, I'm curious what percentage, by looking at this map of David's kingdom, how much did David increase Israel's territory? Okay, who would say 25%? 50? Some 50s. Anybody say 100? Okay. The official answer is, they went with 100. Okay. All right. So 100 would mean it doubled, right? That's what they're thinking. But certainly you can see on the map there that it increased greatly because of David's reign there. It's referred to as the Golden Age of Israel. During this time, David is leading. Things are growing. Things are going really, really well up through chapter number 10. And there's not idolatry here. That's been stamped out. There's no spiritual weakness in the nation. It's just going great guns. And of course, during that time when things go well, Satan is eager to bring temptation. And so that brings us to the second part of 2 Samuel, David's fall and punishment, chapters 11 and through 20. Our author here says that in the Bible, there's probably no chapter more tragic than this one, chapter number 11. David's army is busy fighting the Ammonites, and David is back home. Of course, he commits sin with Bathsheba and finds out that she is expecting, and in order to cover his sin, calls Uriah to come home and hangs out with Uriah a little bit, and then sends Uriah to his own house to spend the night before going back to the battle the next day, anticipating that that will cover his actions. But what is Uriah's response? Chapter 11, verse number 11. All right, can you see that in your scriptures? 2 Samuel 11, verse number 11. Why did Uriah not go home? And Uriah said unto David, the ark and Israel and Judah abide in tents. And my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are encamped in fields, open fields. Shall I then go into my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife as thou livest and as thy soul liveth? I will not do this thing. Uriah's got incredible character here. David's struggling and doing a lot of things wrong, and it's snowballing in his life. But Uriah's got some pretty incredible character here. I'm not going to go home and just chill and relax when everybody else is out at the battlefield. That should have been a rebuke to David right there. When David discovered that he had been unsuccessful in covering up his sin, what did he do? Anybody remember? Before we read it, what did he do? Okay, try to get him drunk. Okay, and what did you say, Vi?
He had him killed.
He had him killed, yeah, ultimately resulting in that. Yes, verse 13 talks about David called him. He did eat and drink before him, and he made him drunk. But he still went not down to his house. And then, of course, David gives Uriah his own death sentence, unknowingly carrying a message to Joab, put Uriah in the hot spot of the battle, withdraw from him and let him die. So he orders Uriah's death, all right, in essence. Isn't it interesting how David can come up with ways to cover his sin? Ways that, in a sense, don't sound horrible. I mean, hey, it's battle. It's kind of interesting that response. Let me look at this here. Verse 25. Then David said unto the messenger, thus shalt thou say unto Joab, let not this thing displease thee, for the sword devoureth one as well as another. Make thy battle more strong against the city, and overthrow it, and encourage thou him. You know, David's got a way to just like reason over it in his mind and cover it over. And I think all of us can be really good at that. Whatever our sin is. This one's murder here. But we find ways of making our sin seem excusable, covering it over, making it not look so bad here. And pretty serious what he does here. Verse 27, and when the morning was past, David sent and fetched her to his house, and she became his wife and bare him a son. Here's a sobering statement. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. He may have tried to cover it over and make it look really good, but God noticed, and God was not impressed. And our author on the bottom, page 44, makes an interesting statement. He had to reap what he had sown, and we can see the harvest in his home and in the nation of Israel. And as you turn the page to 45 there, David, of course, in chapter 12 is confronted by Nathan. Nathan tells him this story, and David makes a decree of punishment upon this story that he tells, and says the man has to reap fourfold, has to pay fourfold for it. And you find, tragically, that David does himself reap fourfold for his own crime. Let's look at this, chapter 12, verse 15. Nathan departed unto his house, and the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bare unto David, and it was very sick. And of course, we understand that ultimately that child dies. All right, so the child who Uriah's wife bore to David dies on the seventh day. That's the first one. The second one, David's daughter is abused there in chapter 13. Also in chapter 13, then, his son, verse 28, now Absalom had commanded his servant, saying, Mark ye now, when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say unto you, smite Amnon, then kill him. Fear not, have not I commanded you? Be courageous and be valiant. So Absalom kills Amnon. I mean, this is really horrible, right? When his son mistreats his daughter, and another son murders his son. I mean, this is just heart-wrenching. And of course, the last one then in chapters 14 through 18 is Absalom. Did I miss one here? Let me back up. Yeah, Absalom is typed in here, so you don't have it on the screen. Absalom leads a rebellion and is killed by David's soldiers. And David's reaction is that he weeps and wishes he had died instead of Absalom. He reaps pretty significantly for his various sins there in chapter number 11. And then David's closing days in chapters 21 to 24. David rules again, reconstruction begins, and ultimately begins collecting for the temple. He can't build the temple, but he's going to make sure that everything's ready so that his son can build the temple. Let's look at chapter 24. Chapter 24. And verse number 1. Again, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he moved David against them to say, go number Israel and Judah. David does this sin of numbering the people. And ultimately, look at verse 24 then, 24. And the king said unto Araunah, Nay, but I will surely buy it of thee at a price, neither will I offer burnt offerings unto the Lord my God of that which doth cost me nothing. So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen for 50 shekels of silver. He sins by numbering the people, and God's judgment is passing, and his judgment is held here, and David offers a sacrifice to God, and purchases this threshing floor. And it's very exciting then to go to 2 Chronicles. One last place to have you turn. Can you turn there real quick? 2 Chronicles, you're in Samuel, then go Kings, then 2 Chronicles 3 and verse number 1. 2 Chronicles 3 and verse number 1. Now these were the sons of David, which were born unto him in Hebron. I'm in 1 Chronicles. That's not going to work. You're going to get lots of genealogies there. 2 Chronicles 3, verse 1. Then Solomon began to build the house of the Lord at Jerusalem in Mount Moriah, where the Lord appeared unto David his father in the place that David had prepared in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. So what's built later there? Solomon's temple. And you know, there's great agony with David's fall. And yet there's incredible grace. The son that follows David is Solomon, who comes from Bathsheba. David sins in numbering the people, and what happens as David sins in numbering the people? The very spot where he has that threshing floor, that's where the temple's built. And our God is always a God who works all things together for good to them who love the Lord. It's an awesome and wonderful thing that God works even in this situation. And so David takes a nation in chaos. He makes it into a dynasty that endures over 400 years. So when you think about the life of David, there's a lot to talk about: the price of sin, the grace of God and forgiveness, what God can do with a man after his own heart. All right. All right, thanks for coming for growth groups this morning. We'll begin our main service in about 15 minutes. You're dismissed.